Hey Professor, so this is my assignment 2, the messenger assignment for distributed systems, winter quarter. So first, I'm going to try and run my testing script so you can see that this is working. You see the output already, I guess. So but I thought I'd run the test just to make sure that's in the video. But then after I run these tests, I'm going to get straight into the code and explain exactly how I implemented this data structure. So the first thing you'll notice in my tests in my testing script or in my my messenger.py is the first thing I define is I define my messenger, and then after that I get into my send method and my set args, and then at the very bottom you can find the main. So basically I'm going to first explain the different methods that go in that are before the main, and then I'll get into that just a little later. So check it out. So I've got the def messenger that I've got the messenger method that takes in the socket. So basically, when it takes in the socket, the first thing it's going to do is it takes the input socket and it sets up the thread sender with the target of with the target equal to the send method that I have defined below, and then the args equal to the socket that was passed in to the messenger method. So then after that, it's going to set up the daemon to true, which means the thread will not join. Then the sender.start part of that will start the sender, and then we're going to try and receive some data using message.equals socket.receives with 1024 in there. And then so while the message is not null, so while we're getting data that is not nothing from the sender. So if the sender presses just enter, then he'll be sending nothing, and then the while loop will terminate. So while it's not nothing though, we're going to print the message, and then we're going to repeat the message so that the message call there, so that we can continuously just keep getting messages until I get nothing. After I get nothing, I'm going to socket.close so I can terminate. Then in my accept here, which pretty much never happens I've seen, but just a safety thing, it just passes. And then then you'll see that I go into my definition for the send here method, and then I also take a socket. And the send is a lot less sophisticated than the messenger. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a message from the user using the sys.standardin read line. Then while the message is not null, so while I'm entering in data that's not just me hitting enter without entering any data, we are going to send the messages to the server, and then we're going to keep repeating that over and over and over until nothing is sent. Then we can close the socket, and that's the entire send method. So then we're going to go into our get arguments here. So I made get arguments just a little bit more sophisticated than it was last time in the assignment, where I've added a little bit more of the if statements and tries and accepts here. So basically what I have is I have a server status of false or true. So based on how many arguments you enter into the program, if you have more arguments because you have the -l, which indicates that you are the server, then we're going to have some additional behavior. And if you do not have that -l, so you have less arguments, then if you just have less arguments, then you are the client. So basically what we first are going to do, we're going to server status is equal to false by default until we get the arguments and we see how many arguments there are. Then we've got the address as localhost, just because I'm doing this on my own local computer here. Then what we're going to do is we're going to try to use the get op to get all the system.arguments. And so save for the first one, since that'll just be the program. So once we get all of those arguments, we can we're gonna have an accept, but it pretty much never gets called, but it's just there for safety. Then you'll see on line 33, if the length of the arguments is less than 1, then we can just exit the program because that's invalid entry. But for I and options, if I0 is equal to -l, meaning that you are listening, then you must be the server. So we set server status to true, and then there's different behavior associated with being the server. So then what we do is we have another try coming up on line 38 there. And so on line 38, we have, or on line 39, so we're getting the port number for this input. And so the port number just is obviously very important for keeping track of identifying establishing the connection. So then what we're going to do is if we don't get, if the port number is invalid because we got to cast it to an int since it's a string, if for whatever reason it's not like the casting doesn't work or something, then I just exit the program, but that pretty much never happens. So then you'll see on line 42, if the length of the arguments is greater than 1, then the address equals the arguments 1. So that pretty much just says that it just makes sure that we get the right address for if you were the server, I believe. So then anyway, so we're going to return the server status, the port, and the address that will be returned from the getArgs method. So then after that, we can take all these three methods that I've defined and put that all together into my main function here. So in my main, I've got the server status, the port, and the address equaling the return values of the getArgs in line 47 down there. Then we've got 48, which is where I declare my socket, or I create my socket. And so socket.socket, just the standard little things that I learned by reading some of the documentation. So then if the server status is true, so if you are the server, then the socket will, first of all, we're going to set some options using the set sock opt method, and then we're going to bind the socket to the port because we've identified the port number. So then once we bind it to the port, we're listening for connections, and then once we find the connection, we can do a socket.accept on line 53, and then after that we can close the socket since we have it saved in the variable socket connected that we declared on line 53, because we don't need the sock socket anymore, because now we have the sock connected variable, because that's what we were going to send to the messenger in the messenger call on line 55. So then once we send that socket through, the messenger did all that behavior where it's going to have the while loop and it's going to keep trying to accept data, and then like we talked about earlier. And so basically it'll just keep accepting data until nothing is sent. Once nothing is sent, the program terminates. And then so let's say that you're not the server. On line 56 here we have that else, and so this means you are the client. So then if you're the client, you're going to try to socket.connect to the address and port to try and connect to the server, because if you're the client, you're not initially just going to be connected to the server. You've got to go and do some work to do that. So then for the sock.connect, we've got the address and the port. So then if we have a connection refused error, then we just exit the program, because you know, that's really not supposed to happen, so we should just restart and see what was wrong. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to begin the messenger with the socket that we created earlier, and so that will allow us to get all that socket data and be able to go through with the program here. So that's all of my code, pretty much in a brief nutshell, as quick as I could do it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and yeah, hope I get the full points on this one. See you in class.